This advice is specifically for daycares. Quote, avoid the use of items, for example, soft or plush toys that are not easily cleaned, sanitized, or disinfected. Here's another one for places of worship. Quote, limit the sharing of prayer books, hymnals, religious texts, and other bulletins. Encourage congregants to bring their own. This document was drafted by the CDC. It is a step-by-step guide, a very practical guide for how society could start to safely reopen without spreading the coronavirus. This is the kind of thing that the CDC excels at. You know, when there is a measles outbreak, when there's E. coli in the lettuce, during any kind of public health problem, the CDC writes up really specific instructions for communities to follow to beat back the problem, to protect everybody's health. When it comes to these reopening guidelines related to coronavirus, the Washington Post was first to report last week that the CDC was prepared to make these very granular, very practical guidelines public by the end of last week. But the Post reported that there were concerns within the Trump administration that maybe the Trump administration didn't like these guidelines. They made reopening stuff seem so hard. Well, today the Associated Press furthered that story and then blew it up entirely. Rather than debating what exactly the CDC guidelines should be for reopening the country, the Trump administration has apparently decided just to toss these guidelines out. Because, yeah, it sure is easier just to tell everybody, open back up, you figure it out. Who wants to deal with this pesky, specific, practical advice about how to actually do so safely without killing people? Who wants that getting in the way? Just open everything up, who cares? Quote, the Trump administration shelved a document created by the nation's top disease investigators with step-by-step advice to local authorities on how and when to reopen restaurants and other public places during the still raging coronavirus outbreak. Agency scientists have now been told that this guidance, quote, will never see the light of day. Joining us now is the reporter who broke this story, Jason Deeren, investigative reporter for the AP. Mr. Deeren, congratulations on this scoop. Thanks for helping us understand it.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Rachel.
Am I right in saying that this is kind of what the CDC does, that this is the type of guidance that the CDC is expert and potentially best in the world at assembling in terms of giving practical advice about how stuff can be reopened, how things should be conducted in a way that's safe for public health?
Right. This is exactly what CDC does, that they're built to do. So the White House had released its reopening plan, which was kind of a vague set of bullet points last month. And what the CDC guidance did, the way I see it, is it filled in the blanks. It gave specific facilities, city leaders, county leaders, state leaders, people thinking about reopening mass transit, daycare centers, as you mentioned, schools, restaurants, bars, all of the places that we all want to go and use again. It gave very specific, kind of more granular instructions. And what was even more interesting is a series of kind of flow charts or decision trees, they call them, which, give a leader or somebody who owns a daycare center a set of steps that says if you meet criteria A, B, C, then move to the next step, and so on and so forth through a flow of decision making. So it really helps, especially people on the ground level with expertise that they're not going to find necessarily at their county health department.
Because of your reporting, even though the White House has said these will never see the light of day and these should be shelved, because of your reporting, you and your colleagues at AP were able to publish some of this guidance. I don't want to ask you about your sources, but I do want to know if you could tell me if there are people within the CDC who are essentially mad that they're being sidelined here, that this guidance and the work that they've done that is very practical and will be helpful to the public isn't getting out, and they're trying to get it out by other means.
Well, what we reported is a couple of different sources inside CDC that my reporting partner, Mike Stabi, and I spoke to, who were, I don't know if angry is the right word, but disappointed that this work that their experts had so carefully constructed to help state partners, because behind the scenes at CDC, what we're hearing is states and local governments are hungry for this information. There are lots of requests coming into the agency for help, and so this is what they do. So I'm sure there's disappointment and some anger there for sure, but I think the main thing is that they want people to get the access to the best information they can to make decisions to keep themselves safe.
One last question for you, Jason, quickly. The CDC is not giving briefings, which we might otherwise expect in a public health crisis. We've reported on CDC advice about meatpacking plants and some things seeming to be sort of oddly inflected with non-CDC language, and other people seem to be leaning on them. Is it your sense that there is, broadly speaking, in that agency, a amount of frustration about what they're not able to do?
I think so. The main reason, is if you look back at previous outbreaks, you can look back at H1N1 in 2009. If you look back, even on the CDC website in the archive, if you look back at, the fungal meningitis outbreak in 2012 or in 2013 or Zika, CDC took a very active public role in all of those outbreaks. They were communicating directly with clinicians, with the public, and with political leaders. They were posting all sorts of videos and guidance on a almost daily basis. So you can just see from looking backward at how CDC has responded publicly as a national leader during these types of crises, how different it is now.